Hey guys, Walls here with a video introduction to the novel of Mice and Men, and this is also a chapter one discussion. All right, so before you read this, read chapter one, or before you watch this, read chapter one, or yeah, so then this will kind of give you some in-depth analysis of what goes on. But so as you get into the novel, you'll see that chapter one is all about exposition. And one thing I want you to keep in mind is that Steinbeck wrote this novel to be performed. When he started writing it, he had it in mind as a drama, as a play where there'd be characters on stage. And so keep that in mind because when you're watching a play, you don't have the benefit of what movie makers can do. All you see is what's on screen, or excuse me, on the stage. There's no like flashback or scenes or cuts to other parts of the place. You just have the characters on the stage and you only know what they tell you. So the dialogue in this story is very important. Not a lot happens. We learn a lot about the characters from their interactions with one another and what they talk about. So each chapter is going to have the same flow. Steinbeck is going to introduce the setting. He's going to let us see. He's going to let us see where we are. He uses a lot of vivid language, a lot of active voice to really make the settings pop. Then we're going to see some dialogue. We're going to see conversations between characters. We'll learn about characters' pasts and get some ideas about what maybe the conflicts will be. And then there will be a conflict. Now, this conflict might be dialogue. There could be an argument. There could be a physical conflict. So each chapter is going to start off with a setting. Then we're going to move to dialogue. And then we're going to move to conflict. And this is a story in 5 acts, a lot like Shakespearean tragedies. We haven't read a tragedy yet in class, but it kind of follows the same arc. You're going to have exposition in chapter one. You're going to have the conflict is introduced in chapter two. In chapter three, there's going to be a major conflict. Something big is going to happen in chapter three. And chapters four and five show the resolution of that major conflict. All right, let's move on here. So chapter one is all about George and Lenny at the campsite. And I want to pull up a passage here. This is one of my favorite passages from the whole book. And what I want you to look for as you read this is the subject verb combinations. Steinbeck writes, evening of a hot day started the little wind moving among the leaves. The shade climbed up the hills toward the top. On the sandbanks, the rabbits sat as quietly as little gray sculptured stones. And then from the direction of the state highway came the sound of footsteps on crisp sycamore leaves. The rabbits hurried noiselessly for cover. A stilted heron labored up into the air and pounded down river. For a moment, the place was lifeless, and then two men emerged from the path and came into the opening by the green pool. So let's look at the subject verb combinations. And most of these verbs show action. Steinbeck doesn't tell us how something was or how something is. He shows us. So the evening started, shade climbed. And note, and I love this subject verb combination because up the hills. That's what you do with a steep hill. You climb it. So the shade climbed, rabbits set, the sound came, rabbits hurried, a heron labored and pounded. We do have a linking verb here. Men emerged. Now, let's look at this sentence. A stilted heron labored up into the air and pounded down river. This is actually our DGP sentence for this the first part of the novel. And I wanted the focus to be on the action verbs. We talked about in class how, I mean, really all Steinbeck had to say was a bird flew away. But there's no drama in that. There's no intensity. So when he says a stilted heron, first of all, we get a clear mental image of what he's talking about. If you don't know what a heron looks like, Google it. And then you'll see why the word stilted is used as an adjective here. And if Google a YouTube video, look at a YouTube video of a heron taking off or leaving the ground. It's not graceful. They are awkward birds. When we see them flying, they look beautiful and graceful and huge, but to get a bird that size into the air takes a lot of effort. So that's why I love Steinbeck's words here, labored and pounded. Now, let's also take a look at the language that Steinbeck uses that gives us a clear picture of what's going on. You've got highlighted in red here, you've got hot, moving among the leaves. We can kind of, we hear what wind sounds like when it moves among the leaves. We can picture the rabbits. Maybe you guys have seen this. I've seen it in people's yards in my neighborhood where they have little sculptured stones of animals. There's a family in my neighborhood that has concrete sculptures of deer that if you catch them in the right light look very, very real. You've got footsteps on crisp sycamore leaves. I challenge you. We're getting into fall. I don't know any kid. I've never seen a kid walk past a big like brown crunchy looking leaf and not step on it. You know what that sounds like. And I like this last sentence here. I want to know, like, how do you think this sentence creates tension or drama? See, it says for a moment the place was lifeless, and then two men emerged from the path and came into the opening by the green pool. So everything seems peaceful, peaceful, peaceful. And then all of a sudden, there's action. The rabbits hurried noiselessly. The heron labored and pounded. The place was lifeless. And then the men enter into the scene here. And who are those guys? They are George and Lenny. So this is a physical description of George and Lenny. What we need to carry with you is this: George is small, but he's not like tiny. He's got sharp features, restless eyes, and it says strong features here. So everything about George is well defined. And as he says here, strong hands, slender arms, thin and bony nose. So that's like the exact opposite of Lenny. Lenny is a huge man, shapeless of face, with large pale eyes and wide sloping shoulders. He's compared here to a bear. So Lenny, in your head, picture like a 250 pound guy, 6 foot tall, and just big. So you've got two very, very opposite people here. And as they have a conversation, you'll see that they're also opposite in terms of personality and intellect. All right. So the dialogue here between George and Lenny is very important. And this is just one example. And as you read George and Lenny's dialogue, I want you to ask yourself these questions here. What do you learn about their past? What do you learn about their relationship? What do you learn about their goals? And what do you learn about them as people? This is why we do our character maps. This is where, this is all really good evidence for our character maps. So, if I ask you to do a character map of George, what evidence would you pull from the dialogue that George has with Lenny that really shows you who he is as a person? All right. Now, at one point in the story, we see that George is very fed up with Lenny and he goes off on him. Now, it's not really about something major. In fact, I think Lenny is just kind of talking about ketchup. But as you read this passage where George goes off on Lenny, what do we learn about the past? And what does it tell you that at the end of this passage, George looks ashamedly at the flames? Now, this passage is key. This tells us why Lenny and George were on the run. Lenny, it looked like Lenny attacked a woman. He was feeling her dress. We know because he talks about the mice. We know Lenny likes to pet soft things. So he apparently was feeling a girl's dress without her knowledge. And then when she kind of catches him, instead of him saying, "Ooh, I'm sorry," he scares her half to death and she screams and screams and they get run out of town. So that's a very key detail here. And we learn that through dialogue. We never see it happen. We learn it through dialogue. And that's going to be a key theme throughout this novel. We learn about major events in this story through dialogue. Okay. Now, dreams. This is where we connect the common lit text, Harvest Gypsies. Remember, Steinbeck wrote Harvest Gypsies, and he wrote that essay or series of essays about migrant workers, just like George and Lenny. He makes a distinction in Harvest Gypsies between migrant workers who come from other countries who are coming from worse situations and coming to North America to work the land and create a better life for themselves versus people like George and Lenny who are Americans who may have experienced some level of success before, but now don't have anything because of hard economic times. So compare the dreams here. What does he say is the dream of the families here, or the migrant workers and Harvest Gypsies? There is one urge and one overwhelming need to acquire a little land again and to settle on it and stop their wandering. And then you have here, okay, someday we're going to get the jack together and we're going to have a little house and a couple of acres and a cow and some pigs and live off the fat of the land, Lenny shouted, and have rabbits. So these men are just like the men that Steinbeck lived and worked with when he wrote the essays Harvest Gypsies. Steinbeck has a deep understanding of these people, their dreams, their desires. And yeah, so you need to be able to, on Monday, put these two things together, have these quotes in mind, and we'll do a little assessment. All right, let's see what's next here. Oh, this is it. So this is at the end of chapter 1. We just get we get George and Lenny's dream. Their dream is to together get their own place, and as Lenny says, live off the fat of the land. All right, guys, I'm going to go and then get chapter 2 discussion video up. Hope you guys have a good one. Email me with any questions, concerns. Make sure you've read chapters 1 and 2 when I see you again on Monday. Take care.